Hello, my name is Sarah Cole. They used to call me Captain. Then they called me Missing. Then they stopped saying my name altogether. One stormy night, I was handcuffed and thrown out of a helicopter by the same officers I once flew beside. No trial, no parachute, just sky, cuffs, and betrayal. Before that, they made me pour coffee at my own debriefing while junior officers joked about my attitude. I spent years earning medals. And they still asked if I was authorized to park in a restricted zone at my own airbase. But I didn't die. I hit the ocean like a blade. And somewhere between the black water and the silence, something in me didn't break. It ignited. So if you're wondering how someone survives a fall like that, maybe ask yourself what made them fall in the first place. You ready? Ellipsis. The phone rang at 6:42 a.m. sharp. The voice on the other end wasn't human in the way a voice should be. It was flat, procedural, like an operator reading a checklist. Captain Serafina Cole, you're being reactivated under a tactical emergency order. Your presence is required immediately. Before I could even answer, an email popped into my inbox. Flight itinerary. Digital clearance. Reactivation order stamped with the Department of Defense seal. Everything lined up, too clean. Too fast. I sat there in my small rented kitchen in Charlotte, North Carolina, staring at my cup of coffee as if it might explain what was happening. The morning sun hadn't even touched the blinds yet. The air smelled like rain and burnt toast. I hadn't heard my rank spoken out loud in 3 years. They called me Captain Cole again, as if the last 3 years hadn't happened, as if I hadn't disappeared into the quiet like a ghost no one wanted to remember. There was a time when I believed being a pilot meant purpose, clarity, even pride. Now it just felt like a bad tattoo I couldn't wash off. I looked around the kitchen. One suitcase by the door. Unopened mail. A photo stuck to the fridge, me in uniform beside my crew. All smiles. All gone now. I pressed my fingers against the glass just long enough to feel the cold. At 7:30, I got in my car and drove toward the base. The traffic lights blinked yellow, and the roads were empty except for the sound of my own thoughts. My chest was tight, but I told myself it was just nerves. It wasn't. It was instinct, the same one that told me when a mission briefing didn't add up. At Fort Belvoir, 3 men in pressed suits and no name tags greeted me. They didn't salute. They didn't smile. They led me into a cold conference room with a single screen showing satellite footage of what looked like bombed-out structures, coordinates, troop paths, encrypted maps. One of them asked, "Captain, do these patterns look familiar?" I leaned forward. They did. They were stolen flight paths from missions I'd flown years ago. Missions no longer classified but still buried deep enough that no one should have had access to them. "Where did you get this data?" I asked. "That's what we're asking you," the man in the middle said. I looked at him, then at the camera in the corner of the room that wasn't supposed to be on. "You think I sold them?" He didn't answer. Another man slid a document across the table. "We're investigating a leak involving unauthorized transfers of military intel. We need your cooperation." The way he said cooperation sounded less like a request and more like a test. They asked where I'd been, who I'd talked to, who had access to my personal files. My pulse climbed. I gave short, clean answers: yes, no, not anymore. But inside, something felt wrong. The air in the room was thick, too calm, too scripted. By noon, they dismissed me, pending further review. I wasn't escorted out, but I might as well have been. When I got back to my apartment, the front door was cracked open. My first thought was that I'd left it unlocked. My second thought was that I never left it unlocked. I pushed it open with my foot. The place was a mess. Drawers pulled out, laptop gone, files scattered across the floor. My old flight jacket, the one with the black hawk patch, was missing. "Michael?" I called out. Silence. My boyfriend's phone was on the counter. Screen smashed. His wallet and keys were still here. No sign of a struggle. Just gone. The rain started then, soft and cold against the windows. I called his number, straight to voicemail. That's when the burner phone on the table buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. A familiar automated voice said, "Captain Cole, you are to report to Andrews Air Force Base at 1800 hours. Bring only one bag, no weapons, This order is not optional. Then the line cut. Not optional. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the rain. The city outside moved like it didn't care whether I existed. I packed one bag. No uniforms this time. Just jeans, boots, my old dog tags, and a small photo of my crew from the last deployment. I slipped it into my jacket pocket. By the time I reached the military terminal, the sun had drowned behind a blanket of dark clouds. A black SUV waited near the tarmac. Its windows were tinted. The driver didn't get out. I hesitated for 1 second. That was 1 second too long. The rear door opened from the inside. A man in plain clothes said, "Captain Cole." His tone was flat, not a greeting. I climbed in. The doors locked. The engine started. No one spoke during the drive. The radio hissed static, the kind that fills the gaps when truth gets buried. We passed the main gate, then turned toward a restricted hangar zone. My pulse started sinking with the hum of the tires. I could smell fuel in the air. Something about the silence pressed harder than any interrogation. I turned to the driver. "Where are we going?" He didn't answer. The man next to me adjusted his gloves. Black leather, no insignia. Then he pulled a gray fabric hood from his bag and held it in his lap. I looked straight into the rearview mirror and met the driver's eyes for the first and last time. He looked away. The man beside me leaned forward and said quietly, "Orders." I didn't fight, didn't move. He slipped the hood over my head. Everything went black. No sound but the low hum of the engine and my own heartbeat. I could feel my breathing bouncing back inside the fabric, shallow and hot. For a moment, I remembered the cockpit, the vibrations of the rotors, the smell of hydraulic oil and storm air, the endless hum that meant you were still alive up there. That sound was my home once. Now, it was the prelude to whatever came next. I clenched my hands in my lap, feeling the roughness of the seat fabric against my palms. I counted seconds in my head. 57, 58, 59, then the sound changed. Louder, higher pitch. A rotor. The air shifted. Cold wind sliced through the open door. I wasn't in a car anymore. The man's hand tightened on my arm. He leaned close and said something I couldn't hear over the blades. But I caught one word: containment. Containment. Then my father's voice echoed in my mind, the same way it did every time before a mission when he'd tell me to keep my head straight. "Don't let the wind carry you away, Sarah." I smiled behind the hood. Just a little. This time, the wind wasn't carrying me anywhere. It was coming for me. And I was done running from it. Ellipsis. Why call me back if they never meant to hear the truth? I thought, as the SUV rolled through the last checkpoint. Then the hood came down. And the world vanished. I couldn't see anything. The hood was thick, scratchy against my face, pulled so tight it pressed into the bridge of my nose. I could still breathe, but the air smelled like old canvas and jet fuel. I knew that smell. Helicopter hangar, not a base terminal. The moment we stopped moving, I felt it, the shift in wind, the low whine of spinning rotors. The vehicle door opened, and cold air slapped my legs. Someone grabbed my elbow. I didn't resist. One wrong move here and they'd call it noncompliance. They walked me forward. Each step vibrated beneath my boots. The ramp, a metal one. I counted maybe 5 seconds before the next shift. Noise got louder. Air thinner, colder. Ramp down, helicopter open. I was being loaded like cargo. One of them removed the hood. Just like that, light hit me fast. Everything was white, blue, gray. Blades spinning overhead, rain streaking sideways in sheets. And in front of me, the open mouth of a military transport chopper. Inside, 5 men in dark uniforms. No insignia, rifles strapped across their chests. They didn't look at me. Or maybe they did, and I just didn't count anymore. One of them tightened the cuffs on my wrists, hard enough to make my knuckles burn. I turned to say something, I'm not even sure what, but he looked away. Jaw locked, like he was holding his own breath. Then I saw him. Commander Brent Whitaker. Same jawline, same silver-gray buzzkit I remembered from my last deployment. He used to smoke cigars on base like he was auditioning for a movie. Back then, I called him, sir, and meant it. Now he stood on the far side of the chopper cabin, arms folded, looking at me like a broken tool he had no use for anymore. "You were never supposed to come this far, Captain," he said, his voice just loud enough to rise over the rotors. I stared at him. No salute, no words, just the weight of every mission I'd flown under his orders. Every life I'd saved because I believed in his commands. The rain hammered the cabin walls like small arms fire. Whitaker stepped forward, nodded to the men behind me. They moved fast. I didn't scream. I didn't struggle. When they dragged me to the edge of the open ramp, it was almost gentle. Almost. Below, nothing but black water and wind and storm. The last thing I saw before they pushed me was Whitaker's face. Still blank, still silent. Then I was weightless. It's strange what you notice when you're falling out of the sky. The air feels thicker than it should. The cuffs dig into your wrists. But they don't hurt. Not really. You're too busy trying to remember if you ever learned how to fall right with your hands tied. I didn't scream. I didn't close my eyes. I just fell. I adjusted my posture midair the way we trained for controlled descent drills. Knees slightly bent. Head up, feet together. But those drills never included handcuffs or betrayal. The ocean was coming up fast. Dark, glassy, endless. I tucked my chin, shifted my shoulders slightly, not to save myself, just to give myself a chance to hit the water at an angle that wouldn't snap my spine. Impact. A slam of cold, violent, shocking, like slamming into a wall made of knives. The breath flew out of my lungs. Salt filled my mouth. I sank fast. The world was noise and pain and darkness. My mind tried to surface before my body could. I kicked once, twice, but the cuffs dragged me down. Panic wasn't sharp, it was slow and rising, like water filling a hallway. I stopped fighting, let my body go still, let the current do what it wanted. If I was going to die here, I wanted to remember what that man did. I wanted to burn his face into my brain so it'd be the last thing I carried across whatever came next. But something inside me, I don't know if it was instinct or rage or something older, said, no. I bent my knees, tucked them in, shifted my weight back, and used the cuffs against each other. It took everything, every bit of oxygen, but I twisted until the steel bit into bone. I didn't care. Pain meant I was still alive. Something cracked. A link broke. My hands were free. I kicked toward the surface like my life still mattered. When I broke through, I didn't scream. I coughed seawater, gasped once. Rain hit my face like bullets. The chopper was gone, just the fading beat of rotors echoing through the storm. I floated, arms dead, body half numb. Somewhere far off, a light blinked. A fishing boat? Maybe. Or just a hallucination. I didn't care. I moved toward it, inch by inch. Every time I thought I'd stop, I'd hear Whitaker's voice. You weren't supposed to come this far. No, I was supposed to go further. I reached the rocks near shore 2 hours later. My left shoulder felt dislocated. My ribs screamed. My ankle was swelling. But I pulled myself up, one jagged stone at a time. I lay there, coughing blood and rain, staring at a sky that had once tried to kill me. My body was wrecked. But my mind was clear. This wasn't the end. It was page 1. They didn't kill me, I whispered into the storm. They just gave me something to rise from. By the time I felt ground under me, I wasn't sure if I was still alive. The rocks beneath my back were jagged, wet, and unforgiving, but they were solid, real. Every breath I took tasted like iron and ocean and blood. That was the trade. You survived the fall. But the sea tries to finish the job. I blinked up at the sky. It was nothing but gray. No chopper, no thunder now. Just rain, light, cold, steady, like the world was washing itself clean after trying to erase me. I dragged myself across the rock ledge one elbow at a time. My left ankle throbbed deep, swollen under soaked fabric. My ribs made a cracking sound when I moved, at least one was fractured. But I was still breathing, and that counted for something. 10 yards ahead, I spotted a crumpled dock half eaten by saltwater. Behind it, half concealed by overgrowth, stood a rusted shack. It looked abandoned, maybe even condemned. Perfect. It took me nearly an hour to crawl to the shack's door. My wet boots left a trail of blood and sea behind me. Inside, it smelled like mildew, grease, And salt, like a place time forgot. I leaned against the wall and collapsed. My arms wouldn't stop shaking. I stared at my hands. Scraped raw, one wrist torn open from the cuff. The bone was visible under the skin. I didn't panic. Not yet. The panic had burned off somewhere between the rotors and the water. There was a rusted first aid kit hanging crookedly on the wall. I got to it. Barely. Inside, one roll of gauze, 3 alcohol packets, one rust-colored suture needle, and a spool of thread. I remember looking at that needle like it was a bullet. And I remember threading it anyway. I've been shot. Burned. I pulled men out of helicopters lit up like matchsticks. But I'd never stitched myself up. Not like that. I worked slowly, biting down on a piece of wood I broke from a chair leg. The pain was clean. Stripped of shock. Just white hot and steady. I whispered names while I did it, not prayers. Names. People we lost. People they forgot. Holt. Ramirez. L.T. Wong. That new kid they called Jersey who barely got through basic but saved 3 kids in Kandahar. They were all in the same ground they were trying to throw me in. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My body didn't have any moisture left to spare. There was an old marine radio in the shack, dead. But intact. Looked like it hadn't been used since Clinton was in office. I opened the back and started pulling wires. Checking for corrosion. 1 wire. 2. A battery terminal with just enough crust to tell me it had a fight left in it. I stripped a copper wire with my teeth and rerouted it. I was betting on a miracle. Or maybe just interference. After an hour of fiddling, I caught a signal. Faint, crackling. A supply vessel reporting engine failure 2 miles north. Drifting toward the coast. It was the first voice I'd heard since they threw me out of the sky. I stood up, slowly. My legs wobbled but held. I found a cracked flare gun, empty. No flares. But next to it was a mirror. Shattered but usable. I grabbed both. I waited until dusk. That's when the vessel's light blinked over the horizon. I climbed to the roof of the shack. Used the flare gun's cracked lens to catch the dying sunlight. And began flashing Morse, SOS. Once. Twice. Again. They didn't stop. But then. A dinghy launched. 2 men aboard. Civilian deckhands, raincoats, weather-beaten faces. They weren't armed. They looked confused as hell. I waited behind the rocks. Watched them scan the shore. When one turned his back, I stepped out. Drenched, covered in salt, blood, and silence. The younger one gasped. The older one froze. I said, "I need to reach the mainland." He didn't ask questions. He just reached out a hand. And just like that, I was on my way back. The boat was quiet, just the churn of water and the low rumble of the engine. They gave me a tarp and some dry socks. Didn't ask for a name. Didn't offer one. I wrapped the tarp around myself and stared at the horizon. Behind me, the wreckage. Ahead, unfinished business. I didn't think about what I'd do next. Not yet. First, I had to get out of the storm. Then I could become it. They docked near a forgotten port. No Coast Guard. No federal noise. Just 2 trucks and a streetlight that buzzed like it had something to say. I slipped into the shadows. Found an old payphone 2 blocks away. Used a stolen ID card I'd kept taped under my boot for 3 years. Dialed a secure line I hadn't called since the day I disappeared. It rang twice. Then, "Sarah?" I closed my eyes. "Noah, I need you to pretend I'm still dead." There was a long silence. Then, barely audible, "Where are you?" "Close enough to raise hell," I said. "You got a plan?" Noah asked. I looked up at the full moon breaking through the clouds. "Yeah," I said, "I'm going to burn them with their own damn spotlight." Salt water dries slow, even in warm air. Blood dries faster. By the time I reached the small port town, both had crusted onto my skin. I looked like something between a drifter and a ghost, barefoot. Limping, wrapped in an oil-stained tarp. One sleeve tied around my shoulder to keep my arm from swinging. People avoided eye contact. Smart. I kept moving, slow and steady down the alleyways, past flickering neon signs and dumpsters that smelled like rot and bad fish. I didn't need clean. I needed quiet. 4 blocks off the pier. I found it. An old bait shop with a rusted tin roof and a padlocked back room. The front had long been abandoned, window cracked, cigarette butts lining the sill. But the lock was weak, and I had a crowbar smile. Inside, there was nothing but shadows and mildew. Good. It meant no one else had claimed it. I set the tarp down, peeled off what was left of my soaked clothes, and sat on a milk crate in my sports bra and fatigue pants. Arms wrapped around my ribs. The air was still. For the first time in days, I could hear myself breathe. Sleep didn't come easy. It came hard and sharp, like someone dropping a blackout curtain over my brain. And with it came the ghosts. Wong, Jersey, Ramirez, Holt. All of them sitting across from me at a mess hall table that didn't exist anymore. All of them looking exactly how I remembered them the night before the Syria op, smiling, joking, clinking their mugs together like we weren't about to fly into hell. In the dream, Jersey asked me why I never told the truth. Ramirez said, "You kept the lid on too long. That's why it blew." Wong looked down at his plate. His food was gone, so was his mouth. I woke up soaked in sweat, gasping. My shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat. There was a Sharpie in my bag. I didn't think, I just grabbed it. Found a space on the back wall of the bait shop, cleared the dust with my forearm, and started writing names. One at a time. Holt, Wong, Ramirez, Jersey. Then others I barely remembered, last names, call signs, sometimes just first initials. The wall filled fast. When I stepped back, I realized I'd been talking the whole time. Not praying, not asking for anything, just talking. Like they were still listening. I found a burner phone in the glove box of a rusted van behind the shop. Prepaid, still had battery. I used it to call one number, a man named Tariq Mbai. Back in Kandahar, he was the only contractor crazy enough to fly an evac bird into a firefight just to pull one soldier out. That soldier was me. He owed me, or maybe I owed him. Either way, I knew he wouldn't ask questions. He picked up after one ring. "Cole? Still breathing. Where? Near the coast. You still running cargo? Only if the money's desperate or the person is. I'm both." Tariq found me that night. He looked the same, taller than I remembered. Beard a little more salt than pepper. But same eyes, sharp. Scanning, always calculating exits. He pulled up in a black SUV with mud caked to the wheel wells and the plates from 3 different states. I stepped out from the shadows. He raised one eyebrow. "You look like hell. You should see the other guy." He didn't smile, just opened the door. "Get in, Black Hawk." We drove in silence for a while. Then he said, "They really threw you out of a chopper?" I nodded. "No parachute." He glanced at me, jaw tight. "You always were hard to kill." Tariq took me to a safe house near the interstate. A cabin built like a bunker. Cinder block walls, no windows, old wood stove in the center and a cot already laid out. There were bandages, antibiotics, and a full jug of water waiting. No questions, just care. That's how people like us operate. After I cleaned up, he finally asked, "What's the endgame?" "Find someone I can trust." "You trust me?" "Enough to sit here." He nodded. That was the closest thing to a hug I was gonna get. I told him about Whitaker. The intel leaks, the phantom orders, the hit job dressed up like military protocol. He didn't blink, just said, "How high does it go?" I shrugged. Far enough that they thought throwing me into the ocean was easier than a court-martial. He leaned back in his chair. "Then you're not running anymore." "No." I looked him dead in the eye. "I'm going to make them run." We pulled up a map. Tactical bases, transport hubs, intelligence choke points, all the breadcrumbs I'd followed before they silenced me. And in the middle of it all, a name. General Brent Whitaker. The man who gave me my first commendation. The man who tried to bury me alive. Tariq tapped his finger against the map. "You think you can get to him?" I smiled. For the first time in days. Not get to him, get through him. Tariq's safe house had a small comms rig, a Frankenstein setup of civilian parts. Old military radios, and a modified Wi-Fi booster hacked into a shortwave scanner. It was messy. It was brilliant. It was all we had. He pulled up encrypted traffic from a server he'd been eavesdropping on since the war. Mostly noise, But I knew how to filter signal from static. Took less than 10 minutes before I heard it. Subject Cole officially listed as Kia. Command requests full blackout on internal chatter. Movement on Phase 2 to proceed as scheduled. Phase 2. That meant this wasn't just about me. It never was. I was just the field test. I stared at the screen. My name, Kia, killed in action, signed off like a cancelled order. I leaned back, stared at the ceiling. They're planning something big, global theater level, and they can't afford a whistle. Tariq nodded slowly. Then you need help from people who can't be bought. That's when I thought of Anika Joe. We served together on Black Ops Logistics in Stuttgart. She had a photographic memory and a moral compass that drove her nuts because it always pointed at the wrong people. After the scandal in Mali, she disappeared into civilian life, or so she claimed. I still had her burner number. Only one call ever made it through. I picked up the old burner phone from my jacket. Dialed. Prayed it hadn't been recycled. It rang. Twice. Then. You should not be calling me. I smiled. Good to hear your voice too. Sarah? Her voice dropped. They said you were dead. I know. I need you to act like that's still true. By nightfall, we had a plan. Anika would arrange transport through an old drone hangar outside Lisbon. I'd fly under false credentials. From there, we'd use my old pilot ID to access a decommissioned NATO data vault. If we were lucky, the key logs would expose what units Whitaker had pulled strings on, and how far the rot went. It wasn't a plan built to survive. It was built to expose. The next 24 hours moved like clockwork. Tariq secured transport. A grounded charter jet scheduled for maintenance. Piloted by a mercenary friend who owed him a favor and $2,000. I wore a long coat. Fake scar down my neck. And a forged diplomatic ID that listed my name as Ellen Cade, foreign policy analyst from Belize. The woman in the photo had a wedding ring. I didn't. I drew a thin line on my hand anyway. Small things sell big lies. Before I boarded, Tariq looked me in the eye. You sure you want this? I nodded. The truth doesn't burn unless someone lights it. He handed me a duffel bag. Inside, a compact encrypted drive, a clean handgun, 2 burner phones, and one thing I hadn't seen in years, my Black Hawk pilot patch. I kept it, he said. Figured you might want it back when the sky was yours again. The flight was smooth, quiet. I barely spoke. The pilot didn't ask why I sat near the emergency door with my hand always near the latch. By sunrise, Lisbon's coastline shimmered below us like a postcard nobody sends. Anika met me at a private terminal, hair tied back, aviators on, blazer crisp like she hadn't aged a minute. She handed me a coffee and a new ID badge. You look like hell, she said. I'm trending, I replied. She smiled faintly. Let's go break something. The NATO data vault was buried beneath what used to be a weather research lab. Anika had access through her old credentials. Scrubbed just enough to get us through the outer systems without flagging the alarm. The hallway smelled of stale air and bureaucracy. Every door buzzed open slower than the one before. But then, we were in. Row after row of outdated servers. No guards. Just the low hum of stored silence. Anika inserted the drive. It pulsed green. Within minutes, the screen lit up with names. Bank transfers. Mission overrides. Phantom units. Civilian targets reclassified as field obstructions. My stomach dropped when I saw who approved them. General Whitaker, Director Vale, Colonel Hughes. They'd built a machine, and I was supposed to be just another lost bolt. Anika leaned back, shook her head. This could bring down half the Security Council. That's the idea, I said. Just then, the floor vibrated, lights flickered. We looked at each other. Not a storm. Not a glitch. Anika snapped her laptop shut. We're not alone. We ran. Back hallway. Side exit. Fire escape. Our steps echoing like alarms. As we pushed through the loading bay, I heard it, footsteps. Then the cold click of metal against tile. Security wasn't military. Mercenaries. One shouted. Black Hawk, on your knees. I didn't stop. Anika pulled me behind a column. She tossed me a flashbang she'd lifted from the supply closet like it was lunch money. I pulled the pin, counted 2 seconds, then rolled it forward. Boom. We moved. Outside, we slid into a waiting maintenance van Anika had stolen earlier, because of course she did, and she peeled out like it was a NASCAR qualifier. Bullets chased us down the tunnel, pinging off the doors. I clutched the drive to my chest. Not out of fear, out of purpose. We had proof now. We had names. They wanted silence. We had a broadcast. I looked out the window as Lisbon shrank behind us. A city still asleep. Next stop, I said, Geneva. Let's wake them the hell up. Geneva was too quiet. It always is. The kind of quiet that pretends nothing bad ever happens in clean suits and mirrored buildings. We arrived just before dawn. The airfield was private, tucked behind diplomatic fencing and soft-spoken security. The jet touched down smooth. No alarms. No one waiting. That was the trap. They thought I was still dead. We let them believe it. Anika handed me the last badge. Eleline Nakade, Trade Envoy. Level 3 diplomatic access. No background checks today. She winked. I nodded. The suit I wore was tied across the shoulders. But clean. Fresh ID tag clipped. Hair slicked back. Scar covered with makeup. Not a soldier. Not a fugitive. Just another face in the summit crowd. But the storm was under my skin. The hotel where the summit was held sat on the lakeside like it had been dropped there by an architect with too much money and not enough conscience. Glass walls. Sensor doors. Soft jazz in the lobby. Every smile in that building felt like a mask you couldn't peel off. Anika worked the tech. I worked the room. We had one goal. Plug the drive into the master media hub before the keynote began. If it worked, every screen in the building would light up with the truth. Every lie would burn in front of the world press. Inside the summit, I saw them. Whitaker, Vale, Hughes. Laughing, shaking hands, signing deals like they weren't standing on the bones of their own betrayal. I kept walking, head down, shoulders square, a soldier in disguise. My badge beeped green at the secure hallway. One guard nodded. I nodded back. The media station was just past the interpreter's booth. Anika had hacked a back door into their software using an AI she wrote in her garage during lockdown. I plugged in the drive. One click. Transmit. Then I waited. Across the conference hall, the screens glitched once, then flickered to black. The summit's logo disappeared. Replaced by bank records, flight manifests, illicit arms transfers, surveillance footage. A voice. Mine. This is Captain Sarah Cole, United States Army. If you're watching this, you've been lied to, and I didn't die quietly. The room froze. Then it exploded. Reporters jumped from their seats. Phones were everywhere. Delegates screamed. General Whitaker turned toward the noise, eyes searching the crowd. Then he saw me. I stepped out from the shadows. No badge, no disguise. Just me, Black Hawk, standing in the middle of the storm. You wanted me erased, I said, loud and clear, but ghosts don't disappear, they haunt. Chaos. Guards surged forward, but they weren't the only ones moving. Some ran, some froze, some filmed everything. Anika's drone, launched at sunrise, hovered outside, projecting the same footage on the glass wall from the outside in. The truth was bigger than their containment. I ducked as a mercenary disguised as security fired 2 shots into the ceiling. Screams tore through the hall. Glass shattered. I rolled left, grabbed the edge of the stage, launched myself under the table. One twist, one punch, gun gone. Training kicks in when fear tries to hijack your brain. I saw Vale heading for the console. Not today, I said under my breath. I fired the emergency lockdown protocol from Anika's transmitter. It froze the doors and duplicated the stream onto 4 global networks before anyone could sever the link. The room had turned into a war zone of reputation. And we'd already won. Then I saw him. Whitaker, standing near the balcony, gun drawn, sweating. You don't understand, he said through gritted teeth. We were protecting national interests. I stepped closer. No, you were protecting your own seat at the table. That's not patriotism, that's cowardice. He raised the gun. I didn't flinch. The drone's spotlight burst through the broken window like the judgment of God. Real law enforcement, actual international agents, flooded the perimeter. Helicopters buzzed above. Sirens wailed like an overdue reckoning. For a second, Whitaker looked so small. I walked forward, calm, measured. I reached out and slowly, firmly, took the gun from his shaking hand. "I don't need revenge," I said. "I just need the truth louder than your lies." The agents grabbed him, hauled him off. And I just stood there, watching it all collapse like a tower built on bones. Annika's voice buzzed in my ear. "It's done. You're alive, everywhere." I stepped outside. The rain had started again. Soft and warm this time. It hit my skin like a baptism. I walked to the edge of the lake. The water shimmered, clean and endless. I knelt, dipped my fingers into it, and let the cold ripple through me. Then I looked up at the sky, the same sky they threw me from. I smiled, not big, not proud, just real. I whispered to the water. They thought they buried me. Then I stood, shoulders square. But I was never the grave. I was the storm. I didn't leave the city until nightfall. They offered me an escort, a press conference, even a commendation from the very department that filed me Kia. I declined all of it. The moment you win in public, they start rewriting your story for you, smoothing the rough edges, spinning your fight into something palatable. But what I did wasn't pretty. And I wasn't here to be liked. I was here to be loud. I walked through Geneva's back alleys alone. The rain had stopped, but the streets still gleamed, like the city couldn't decide if it was clean or just reflective. People passed by without recognizing me. That was good. I needed one more night before the world remembered I was alive and expected me to speak again. I turned down a narrow corridor lit by a single, flickering street lamp and slipped into a tiny corner cafe that smelled like burnt espresso and old jazz. The owner didn't ask questions. He poured me black coffee and disappeared into the kitchen. I sat by the window. Outside, the lights on the lake danced like quiet ghosts. Everything felt still, but not peaceful. There's a kind of stillness that comes after the explosion. Smoke doesn't scream. It just hangs in the air and reminds you something broke. Annika joined me 30 minutes later. Hood up, coat wet, face calm. "You didn't have to come," I said. She shrugged. "You didn't say not to." I pushed the second cup toward her. She took a sip and grimaced. "You always drink coffee like it's punishment." "Helps me think," I said. "Think about what?" I looked out the window again. What happens after they know the truth? That's the thing no one prepares you for, the part after. After the reveal, after the broadcast, after the headlines. People think exposing corruption means something gets fixed, that the liars go to prison and the rest of us get medals and closure. But the truth is messier than that. Some resign, some go silent, some shift blame until nobody can remember who lit the match. And the people like me? We get reduced to footnotes or get asked to write books we didn't come to this world to write. Annika reached into her bag, pulled out a thumb drive, and slid it across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "The rest of it," she said, "the connections we couldn't show yet. The parts that lead to civilian contracts, political contributions, 3-star careers built on ghost operations and off-the-books tech." I stared at it, didn't touch it. She leaned forward. "We can bury them, for good." I shook my head slowly. "I'm not sure they'll ever be buried. People like that don't rot. They mutate." Annika smiled, tired and sharp. "Then we keep the fire lit." Before she left, she touched my shoulder lightly. "You did it, Sarah." I didn't answer right away. "Then, no, we did it." She smiled again, then she was gone. I sat there another hour, watching the reflection of my own face shift in the window glass. For the first time, I really looked at myself. The scar above my collarbone, the burn mark near my left knuckle, the way my eyes didn't blink as often anymore. This face had been erased from records, declared dead, forgotten by the people I bled for. And yet here I was, still breathing, still moving. That's not luck. That's design. When I left the cafe, I didn't head for the safe house. I walked straight to the harbor, found a public terminal at the edge of the dock, and uploaded the second drive. No passwords, no gatekeepers, No agencies involved. I posted it to a secure, whistleblower-backed server that broadcasts raw intel to journalists, watchdogs, and anyone else who doesn't mind truth being ugly. Then I smashed the drive against the dock railing and tossed the pieces into the water. Let the next storm find me clean. Back at the safe house, I finally opened the box I'd been ignoring since Lisbon. The one Tariq gave me along with my Black Hawk patch. Inside, a photo of my original squad. A patch that read, "Honor is louder than orders." A letter, handwritten, his handwriting. If you're reading this, you lived. If you lived, you have a choice, disappear or disrupt. You were always meant for the second one. They trained you to fly. You taught yourself to land. I read it 3 times before folding it back into the box. Then I opened my laptop. New email. No name, just a subject line. There's another summit. Panama. You interested? I stared at it. Then typed, "Always, Black Hawk," and hit send. I closed the laptop. Outside, the rain started again. Not a storm this time. Just a warning shot. I never liked flying commercial. Too slow, too crowded, too noisy. Everyone looking down at phones like the sky didn't matter. But this flight, chartered under a foundation's name I'd never heard of, seats paid for in untraceable crypto, felt different. It wasn't luxury, it was distance. Just me, a duffel bag, and a drone monitor built into the wall across from my seat. We were cruising at 32,000 feet somewhere over the Atlantic. But I wasn't thinking about altitude. I was thinking about angles. Because the truth has an angle too. And this time, I wanted to see it from the sky first. The Panama Summit was an informal gathering, unofficial, unrecorded, attended by people whose names never show up on rosters. Defense liaisons, black budget operators, energy magnates with private armies. They weren't diplomats, they were decision makers who didn't need permission to cause chaos. According to the intel Anika decoded, Whitaker wasn't the end, he was just the visible part of something older, deeper, a network of military-industrial parasites trading favors across oceans. Panama wasn't just their next deal, it was their reset button. And I was flying into it alone. I spent most of the flight building something with my hands. A transmitter, smaller than a cigarette lighter, made from scraps, a cracked watch, a flight attendant's broken earpiece, and an old SIM card I decrypted midair. Tariq taught me years ago, a soldier survives with what's in their pocket. A ghost wins with what no one sees coming. This wasn't a kill op. It was a broadcast waiting to happen. We landed just after 2 a.m. on a private airstrip half hidden by jungle. No lights, no customs, just a man in a black suit holding a clipboard and pretending not to recognize me. "Ms. Cade," he said. I smiled thinly. "That's me." He led me to a waiting SUV. I said nothing. He said nothing. That's how these events worked, eyes forward, mouths shut, and secrets wrapped in champagne flutes. The summit venue sat on a bluff outside Panama City, an architectural fortress with soundproof windows, drone jammers, and guards who looked like they got kicked out of every government alphabet before joining the private sector. I walked through the main lobby with my forged ID, heels clicking on polished marble, heart calm, nobody looked twice. But I wasn't here for introductions. I was here to record the unrecordable. Upstairs, in a lounge above the main hall, I found what I was looking for, the nerve center. An audio relay hub tied to the summit's internal translation system. It was locked, of course, so I waited. 10 minutes later, a young tech in a wrinkled badge shirt came to reset the system. Looked bored, probably didn't know the weight of the conversations flowing through those circuits. I stepped out from the shadows. He turned. Ma'am." I flashed my badge. "Security audit. Routine." His eyes darted. "I didn't hear about that." I didn't let him finish. One twist, one push, no violence. Just redirection. He stumbled into a supply closet and I locked it behind him. Left a bottle of water inside. I'm not cruel. Inside the relay hub, I planted the transmitter. Tied it into the translation feed. Synced it to a second drone that Anika had pre-programmed from Geneva. It was already in the air. Waiting. This time, I wouldn't need to make a speech. I'd let them do the talking. Downstairs, the summit began. Soft applause. A fake standing ovation. Words like collaboration and stability thrown around like confetti in a storm. I stood behind tinted glass, earpiece in, listening as these men congratulated each other for future operations that hadn't even started yet. I heard them talk about natural resource access in contested zones, about security escalations that justify intervention, about the price of bodies when you buy in bulk. They didn't whisper, they laughed. That's what always got me, how casual they were with destruction. Then the drone kicked in. Every screen in the building lit up, not all at once, but in rhythm, like a heartbeat syncing to a countdown. Audio snippets began to loop. That airstrike was never authorized, but the margin was acceptable. The local deaths were categorized under environmental hazard. Tell the logistics firm we'll take the next batch under diplomatic seal. Voices, faces, contracts, signatures. The room turned ice cold. Someone shouted, someone ran, phones flew up, but the signal was everywhere now, mirrored across 6 independent media servers. Projected outside onto nearby buildings. Broadcast through open frequencies. I stepped onto the balcony. Looked down at the men scrambling beneath the chandeliers. No need to confront them. Not this time. I wanted them to see the sky light up and know who put them there. A few minutes later, I walked calmly through the exit tunnel. Security didn't stop me. They were too busy answering to the people watching their every move. When I reached the cliffside, my drone hovered down, a little beat up, blinking like a tired eye. I caught it mid-air and walked back toward the trees. At the edge of the jungle, I stopped. The signal was still alive. I looked up at the stars. Altitude never lies. It just waits for the ones who survived the fall to come back and own it. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the last transmitter, and crushed it under my boot. The fight wasn't over, but now, the world knew my name, and that was how every storm begins. I woke up before the sun. The air was thick with salt, the kind that coats your skin and sticks to your thoughts. I sat up on the edge of a rusted fishing boat docked somewhere along Panama's forgotten coastline. No GPS, no schedule, just a horizon painted in silence. It had been 3 days since the summit. 3 days since the world finally saw what I saw. The media was on fire. Military analysts were scrambling. Investigations were launched so fast you'd think they'd been waiting for an excuse. My name was in every headline. Some called me a traitor. Others a hero. But I didn't read the articles. I already knew who I was. Sarah Cole, Black Hawk, the woman they tried to erase with gravity and lies. But they failed. And now, I had a choice. Disappear for real. Let the myth live while I did something quieter. Or fly again. Not literally. The skies weren't mine in that way anymore. But I could still disrupt. Still strike. Still make sure that when the powerful moved in darkness, the echoes of my voice followed them like a warning shot. I climbed off the boat. My boots hit the sand. Soft and hot. The ocean whispered behind me, calling me back, but I didn't turn around. I had someone to meet. His name was Miguel Rosas. Retired journalist, former war correspondent, lived in hiding after his exposé on private militias cost him 2 bullets and a lung. He was waiting for me in an abandoned lighthouse. 40 minutes inland, the place reeked of mildew and ink, but his radio equipment was pristine, better than most intelligence units I'd seen. He didn't smile when he saw me. He just said, "Took you long enough." I handed him a drive. Everything else, the stuff we couldn't air, I wanted out there. Slow leaks. Every week. No names protected. He nodded. No questions asked. "You're not scared?" I asked. He lit a cigarette with shaky fingers. At my age? Scared is a tax I don't pay anymore. I liked him immediately. We sat and talked for hours. Not just about corruption, but about legacy. About how silence was its own kind of violence. About the weight of truth and the cost of carrying it into the light. By sunset, I was already repacking my gear. Roses walked me to the door. "Where will you go now?" I looked out toward the mountains. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere loud, depends who's listening." He laughed, a dry, Rough sound that still felt honest. Before I left, he handed me a sealed envelope. Open it when you think you're done. I slid it into my jacket. Didn't ask. I traveled north, through back roads and dust towns. Bought passage under fake names. Slept in cargo holds and train yards. The world was shifting. You could feel it in how people looked at uniforms now. Less reverence, more questions. I liked that. In a small diner outside of Durango, a waitress recognized me. Her hands shook as she poured my coffee. "I saw you on the screen," she whispered. "You made them answer." I nodded, not knowing what to say. Then she added, softer, "My brother, he didn't come back from Kandahar. They said it was a training accident. But..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a card with nothing but a signal icon and a number. "Call this. Tell them you met Black Hawk. They'll listen." She clutched it like a relic. And for the first time since Geneva, I felt something real settle in my chest. Not revenge. Not victory. Impact. 2 weeks later, I stood on a cliff in New Mexico. High above a valley I used to fly over during drills. The wind cut sharp across the rocks, carrying dust and memory. I opened the envelope Miguel gave me. Inside, a photograph. Me, in full flight gear, years ago, smiling, alive in a way I hadn't been in a long time. And a note. "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what refuses to die when they bury you. Keep flying." No signature. Just truth. I looked up. The sky was wide, open, mine again. They tried to throw me out of the world. But all they did was give me the sky back. So I turned toward the wind. And I walked forward. Not to run. Not to hide. But to rise.